Hello.
Welcome to Are You Karate Kidding Me?
We are a recap podcast covering Cobra Kai, The Karate Kid, news and information from all around the Miyagi-verse. Calling Canada.
I am Jenny Carlson, and we love The Karate Kid and Cobra Kai.
We do love The Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, and we're very excited for the new season of Cobra Kai, which continues to get even closer, just a couple of weeks now away by the time you hear this episode, and we are very excited.
As part of the marketing push, the official Cobra Kai account and cast are asking us to pick a side. And I noticed that you tweeted on our behalf that Cobra Kai versus Miyagi-Do was like Slytherin versus Gryffindor, that we were team Miyagi-Do all the way.
I don't think there's anything controversial about those statements. I feel like Miyagi-Do versus Cobra Kai is definitely the American equivalent of Gryffindor versus Slytherin. For sure.
I mean, that's fair. I love characters on both sides of this divide.
Yes.
But I do have a Miyagi-Do mug.
Very much so. And we both have the Miyagi-Do headbands and our own Tenaguis. So we're firmly representing Miyagi-Do. There are plenty of people out there who can represent Cobra Kai. And I'm sure a lot of people enjoy the flash and the glamour and the
big scary snake.
Yeah, and the big scary snake. But... you know, at what cost, you know?
Well, that remains to be seen. That's what we're about to find out.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's why I compare it to Slytherin. It's like, yes, Harry Potter fans will insist that there were some good kids who happened to be assigned House Slytherin, and maybe that will also hold true for Cobra Kai. We'll just have to see.
I mean, Draco Malfoy was redeemed, and in the end, your house didn't matter as much as what you did when push came to shove, right?
Exactly. So
I'm on the side of karate and the American way. Well, no. Let me be more clear. I'm on the side of karate and justice.
And balance.
Balance. Exactly. I mean...
balance in all things.
I could start talking about how the light side and the dark side need to be reconciled, but then we would be doing a Star Wars podcast.
That's right. And there are already 5 billion of them, and that's why we don't do a Star Wars podcast. We do a Cobra Kai / Karate Kid podcast, although we're very liberal with our Star Wars joke supply.
It's true. So... let us begin Cobra Kai episode 8, Molting. I just said that episode 7 was one of my least favorite episodes, but actually episode 8 fills me with the same heart pain and cringing that episode 7 does. So let's delve into the angst together, shall we?
Yes, let's jump right into Cobra Kai episode 8, Molting.
Molting.
So we open on a junkyard where Johnny is presiding over a Cobra Kai sanctioned field trip, but Johnny has some admittedly unconventional training ideas.
He's wearing a red jacket. He looks like the Johnny Lawrence of old. He's wearing a red jacket. He's got his black headband. He's drinking a Coors Banquet, and he's standing on top of a defunct bus that says All-Star Kids Academy, which I Googled, and there are multiple All-Star Kids Academies, including one in Georgia where there's a shot. So, he is leading them in some cheers, some military-style call and responses, basically about how they're going to become badass. They're a little green still.
Johnny has definitely got a situation where he needs to get these bad news bears into I guess he needs to make them into the badass news bears.
There could be nothing more awesome than what I'm seeing of these kids smashing the crap out of old cars with sledgehammers and throwing shit out of windows like David Letterman, but with a mohawk.
Johnny definitely knows how to appeal to kids. There's two things kids love. It's field trips and careless vandalism. And so this field trip's got it all until Johnny, much like a few episodes ago where he threw Miguel hands tied into a pool, he's thrown these kids into a junkyard with starving guard dogs, or at least that's the implication.
He's thrown them to the wolves. He gave them pieces of meat and then called the dog
exactly.
whistle.
He released the hounds on the on those poor Cobra Kai kids. But we'll have to see how they fare later, because we cut back to the LaRusso manse, where Grandma Lucille is here.
That's right. As the doorbell rings, Sam is looking at some happy pictures of her and Miguel. We can tell their relationship is progressing nicely. And they run to the door to find Lucille, who is played by the great Randy Heller, also Mrs. Blankenship from Mad Men. At any rate, so Randy Heller's back. We get to hear her refer to Ralph Macchio's eyes as baby browns.
The great thing is all these actors from Karate Kid reprising their roles, and really for them it feels like no time has passed.
She has not changed a bit, and indeed, she is mad as hell that the Cobra Kais are on the rise. She and Daniel are talking smack about them, and
tell them how they pushed you down that hill.
Well, they've already heard it, Mom.
And we find out that Daniel's been exaggerating some of the sufferings that he went through at their hands.
I thought it was a cliff.
Nonetheless, everyone is in agreement that the Cobra Kais are the worst.
Exactly.
Not only does Lucille have the energy to diss the Cobra Kais, she also has the attention span to notice that Amanda has brought store-bought salad or store-bought pasta salad or something like that to their poolside picnic. And she can throw shit on that because as a single mom, she not only worked, she also cooked.
Lucille takes the opportunity to throw some shade on Amanda and heighten some tensions around the LaRusso table. For all the LaRussos' resources and their position in life, they really don't have a much more functional family than Johnny does.
As the tension builds between Lucille and Amanda, and it's all back and forth, we see that Sam is kind of freaked out by Daniel's dislike of the Cobra Kais because, as she says,
what if Cobra Kai's changed? I mean, there's some kids from my school who are in it, and that doesn't automatically make them bad, right?
Daniel's like,
Cobra Kai will never change. Promise me you stay away from the kids who are associated with it.
Which is a problem, given that Sam is already together with Miguel.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a classic West Side Story in the making here. During this weenie roast, we get the complete info dump on the Cobra Kais, why they're bad, why Sam should stay away from them. Louie wants revenge on the Cobra Kais. He wants revenge on Johnny, even though all Johnny did was get his car repaired there. The very act of bringing back Cobra Kai has Louie coming in hot.
But as Claire Danes once said,
how which we call a rose by any other word would smell as sweet.
This is the problem. Miguel and Sam are into each other, but they don't even have a chance.
No.
Because their families, their houses are at odds.
They're two houses at odds in Reseda, in Los Angeles.
In the Sanford, never mind. We'll figure it out. We'll
workshop it.
But suffice it to say, we see that it's not just the LaRussos who have an issue with Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai has an issue with the LaRussos because Miguel has been hitting the punching dummy, the classic Cobra Kai punching dummy, who probably has a name, I just don't remember. He gets a text and Johnny's like, what's going on? And Miguel's like, oh, my girlfriend sent me this picture. And Johnny sees the picture and recognizes Samantha LaRusso from the car wreck that he had and from the fact that she's Daniel LaRusso's daughter. This is all earlier in the season.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you're dating a LaRusso?
Yes, all the pieces of the blueprint are falling into place for sure. During Miguel's solo training with Johnny, Johnny manages to scope out that, he's been seeing Sam. Johnny decides to have one of his distinctly Johnny Lawrence-style heart-to-hearts with Miguel. They go out and sit on the stoop outside the Cobra Kai dojo, and Johnny gets the complete info dump on the events of Karate Kid 1. Johnny could have saved Miguel the trouble and just directed him to our podcast, but Johnny's an 80s guy, so he's probably not hip to all that stuff.
There they sit on the edge of the parking lot with Johnny drinking his banquet, and I believe Miguel is drinking a nice frothy Coke, talking about Johnny's glory days.
Yeah.
And the story begins not with Daniel LaRusso, but with the first time that Johnny saw Allie, when he and his friends were harassing Allie and her friends at the movie theater, and Dutch, i.e. Chad McQueen, was throwing popcorn at the women, which is what you do because, as Johnny explains to Miguel,
"Cause it's an alpha move, man. Babes love when you treat them like crap."
Johnny, confusing the idea that any kind of attention is good attention, delivers some very bad advice to Miguel. He recounts the entirety of Karate Kid 1, but from Johnny's unique perspective, which I thought was a fun touch.
Then Daniel LaRusso came to town. Next thing I know, he's hitting on her. I see the two of them flirting with each other. I walked over to have a civil conversation with Allie, but LaRusso kept butting it.
He says they were madly in love.
Indeed.
And he talks about her as a firecracker. I mean, what's funny is that he says babes love it when you treat them like crap. But in reality, what he liked about Allie was that she stood up for her friends. Like, she dumped popcorn on top of Dutch. Like, she didn't take it, and that's what he was attracted to. They hit a bump in the road. Johnny doesn't talk about what that bump in the road is. I'm hoping someday we'll find out that it's because Cobra Kai's darker side began to get to him. He assumed they were on a break.
We were on a break, okay?
Whereas we know from watching The Karate Kid that Allie was done with Johnny. And then here comes interloper Daniel LaRusso. And as Johnny is telling Miguel this story, the most sympathetic audience he could possibly have, this sort of Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits style music plays. Like, you can hear Johnny's longing and his quest in the soundtrack. And from Johnny's perspective, he explains, as we see all these flashbacks.
I figured that was that. But LaRusso wouldn't leave it alone.
Like, Daniel's the one who sprayed water on him at Halloween. Daniel did all this terrible stuff, like took his girl. And in fact, when Johnny went to retaliate, Daniel had his own karate master who kicked the crap out of him. So for Johnny, Daniel was the guy who made everything go wrong.
Johnny's not wrong. This is definitely the point where things started to go wrong for him. It's just the idea that from his perspective, it was Daniel who wouldn't let up. Again, the idea of persistence. When the persistence is coming from the other person, it's unwelcome attention. When the persistence is coming from you, it's determination.
That's it. So we see these flashbacks. We see the flashback to the tournament, again, from Johnny's perspective. Miguel's like, what happened? He's like, I lost. And Miguel's so pissed. Like, you can tell Xolo Maridueña is selling it so hard that Miguel is enraged on Johnny's behalf. And Johnny says, but what's worse is not that I lost the tournament. What's worse is that I lost Allie. So for Johnny, it's personal. It's not even about the tournament. Like, Johnny's clear that he cares more about people than karate, but his ego with karate always gets in the way. But Johnny's not the only one with an ego, because back at the LaRusso manse, we're sitting around the table, and Daniel is talking about how much he misses Mr. Miyagi, and he and Lucille are talking about how wonderful Mr. Miyagi was to them. And Louis comes in with this harebrained scheme to start selling high-end motorcycles out of the dealership because of some bikers he met in Vegas.
A never-ending font of bad ideas, Louis is telling a story about he was at a seedy event in a seedy place, talking to some seedy guys, and all it is to establish that Louis knows some troublemaking bikers. Of course, Daniel and Amanda think it's a terrible idea. Lucille jumps up to defend Louis.
Because he's family, she says.
The idea that any sort of criticism is a strike against the family.
And this just reignites the already simmering tensions between Amanda and Lucille, daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. And we see that everyone begins to fight. Things are not happy. But meanwhile, back at, what is the name of this apartment complex? Reseda Flats, where both Johnny and Miguel live. Johnny's driven them back, and there's Carmen, Miguel's mom, inviting Johnny to dinner.
Yeah, so things are definitely looking up for Johnny, as all he had planned was an evening of Hot Pockets and probably more Coors Banquet. But instead...
Don't forget the Iron Eagle.
Of course, who could forget the Iron Eagle? And so Carmen absolutely insists that Johnny join them for dinner. They have a very charming time where Johnny gets a primer on intersectionality.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. Like, you can tell that compare and contrast with the LaRusso dinner. This is just Carmen, her mom Rosa, Miguel, and Johnny, and they're praying. They all get along. Johnny is a bit of an idiot.
I really like these bananas.
They're called plantains.
Oh. In English, we call them bananas.
Billy Zabka plays this clueless but well-intentioned, somewhat patronizing white guy to a T. He and Carmen are talking, and it's obvious that it's reaching his heart, even though he doesn't quite know how to react. But Miguel gets a message or a call. It's his girlfriend, so he goes in the other room to take it.
Miguel gets that mid-meal text from Sam, and his mom, Carmen, being quite lenient, allows him to go take it so that they get some one-on-one time with Johnny, I'm assuming.
But they're going to FaceTime Miguel and Sam or do whatever the Android equivalent of that is. Mm-hmm. And Sam is calling Miguel because she's like so frustrated. It's World War III at her house. And they're trying to figure out when they can see each other again. And Sam's like stressed out. And Miguel is busy practicing for the big tournament. And already we see the seeds of doubt being sown from either side, right? Sam wants to know why Miguel has to train so hard. And
Sam wants to encourage Miguel to ditch Cobra Kai altogether.
Sam is like,
There's a bunch of other dojos in the valley.
I don't know, maybe give a different dojo a try?
and Miguel's like,
No, I could never do that to Sensei Lawrence.
meanwhile, Daniel runs into, because Daniel can't manage his own family's emotions, he has to get his daughter to do the emotional labor, runs in to try to get Sam to come back outside and referee. Then Sam, he says, who are you talking to? And Sam's like, nobody.
Yeah.
And of course that affects Miguel because it just triggers this sense that there's nothing good about Daniel LaRusso. There's nothing good about the LaRussos in general. Like something is rotten in the state of Denmark.
I was going to say something similar. It's a very cool, like during this FaceTime, we shift perspective from Miguel to Sam. And when Daniel interrupts Sam, she quickly sweeps Miguel under the rug while Miguel is on the line, which, of course, is pretty disheartening for him.
Exactly. Meanwhile, back at the discussion between Johnny and Carmen and Rosa, they've already talked about that Carmen's worried about that Miguel might get hurt, and Johnny's like,
At least not permanently.
it's typical Johnny. But the other thing that happens is that it comes out that they're there in the U.S. because Carmen had to leave where they were in Ecuador because Miguel's father's a very bad man. He was in a dirty business or a bad business. Of course, my spidey sense says that it's probably Terry Silver from Karate Kid Part 3.
I know.
We don't know that. My head canon says, though, that it's Terry Silver. I can't wait to find that out. But anyway,
probably,
we'll get to
definitely
that later.
Terry Silver's henchman, for sure. Somebody with, yeah.
Exactly. So, and explaining that, and you can tell that Johnny is sorry that he brought it up, and he's like,
Sorry to hear that.
he's anticipating a shame response because he, I think, has a lot of shame. And Carmen says back,
Don't be sorry. You can't let the mistakes of the past determine your future.
and that really affects him. We see him reflecting.
Like this whole sequence with Johnny, we get to really see him run the gamut. It starts off very fun, but it quickly resolves itself in a very real place. I can't wait to see how this relationship between Johnny and Carmen and even Johnny, Carmen, and Miguel evolve as the series goes on.
Meanwhile, back at the LaRusso manse the next day, Robby arrives to do some karate with Mr. LaRusso and instead sees a vision laying on the pool furniture beside the pool. That would be Sam in her bathing suit. And Robbie's like, whoa.
Whoa.
So taken is he that he tries to pivot and go back. But just like Daniel LaRusso before him, collides.
He crashes headlong into those wind chimes. Probably the exact same wind chimes that Mr. Miyagi owned.
It's a big tell. And then here comes Daniel to introduce his former student, Sam, to his current student, Robby.
Yeah, so it's a real meet-cute situation between Sam and Robby.
Well, Robby sure hopes it is.
I think it's pretty obvious the show wants us to feel that way, too. Robby's spending so much of the first half of this season being, either cool, collected, or angry. We suddenly find him in a place where he's definitely more vulnerable, definitely more sensitive. And so what do we do with that newfound sensitivity? Well, we head out to the woods.
They're driving to the woods because that's where Daniel goes to train now, I guess. Climate change has caused the reservoir to dry up. Also, off camera, they're shooting this in Georgia, so they have the lovely park surrounding Stone Mountain that they can shoot at, which is where they filmed this sequence. Daniel explains to Robby that this is what Miyagi-Do karate is all about, like focusing in nature, fighting your balance, basically, we'll learn. So they're out there walking, listening to the sound of nothing. Meanwhile, as they find a good spot to set up to train, Johnny's been busy.
Johnny has really done a bang-up job cleaning up his apartment. He's been to Costco, got himself a nice flat screen. He digs through the refrigerator, considering his Coors Banquet.
We got some soda, OJ, purple stuff, Sunny Delight.
And he opts for the Sunny D, as you obviously should.
And because he's chosen to drink vitamin C rather than beer, he's sober enough to make it to the end of Iron Eagle, just showing on his flat screen. And we learned that Chappie looked like Chappie was dying when Johnny was weeping in front of Iron Eagle the last time he watched it. But no, Chappie's back. He made it. So Johnny might make it too.
Cut back out to the beautiful Southern California, Georgia wilderness, where Robby and Daniel are just burning it up doing their kata, and it culminates in Daniel doing some advanced Miyagi-Do, where Daniel has the exact same catcher's outfit that Mr. Miyagi had, and he's teaching Robby to do the 1-inch punch, made famous by the original Karate Kid and also Kill Bill.
Focus power.
That's right.
Yeah, and there's a beautiful sequence here as Daniel and Robby in unison are doing their kata, and the music is playing from in the moment in the Karate Kid when Daniel's really preparing for the tournament after he's learned about Mr. Miyagi's hardship and the loss of his wife, and he goes out and trains on his own, and it's the same music that's playing there, this beautiful Bill Conti music. And it looks like they're done, but no, Daniel has one more big lesson to teach Robby, and that's about finding his balance.
He has a lesson for Robby about literally finding his balance by balancing up on a big log. Robby says that he knows how to balance from his skateboard, but Daniel has a more philosophical approach.
It's about balance in his life, because as Daniel knows, growing up without a dad is a really hard thing. So in this moment, we learn that Robby's confided enough in Daniel that Daniel knows that Robby doesn't have a dad. He doesn't know, it seems, who Robby's dad is, but he knows that Robby has some baggage. And in that moment, too, Robby's like, I have something I have to tell you, because he knows that this is not going to end well if Daniel finds out that Robby's Johnny's son. But Daniel's just so earnest, and it's been such a good day, it looks like, that Robby just can't bring himself to tell Daniel the truth. So instead, he climbs on the log.
Yeah, Robby could have really saved himself some trouble by telling Daniel, but instead he had a flashback to a moment of shame he had where he spied Miguel hugging Johnny outside the Cobra Kai dojo when Miguel got his gi for the first time. And Robby hops up on that log. He gives balance a try. He does a pretty good job balancing at first, but then when he tries to spin kick, he just flings himself clean off the log and onto the ground. And Daniel's only real advice is to...
You get back up and you try it again.
He's going to go see if he can find good Wi-Fi reception.
The Devils are playing the Islanders on the East Coast.
But Daniel walks off to watch a hockey game, and that's his equivalent of Mr. Miyagi dressed up in his Hawaiian shirt going out probably to the Senior Citizen Center.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Meanwhile, Miguel, Aisha, and Hawk are at the movies. Hawk throwing the popcorn, as he probably learned from Miguel, chicks dig. And Miguel is confiding that it's really gotten to him, this idea about the LaRussos, and that his sensei has this beef with Sam's dad. And Aisha and Hawk are both they have more perspective about it. Like, they're like, that's not your problem. And Aisha's like,
So Sensei and Sam's dad have some beef. What's that to do with you?
At any rate, they advise Miguel to just go over there and say hi and introduce himself rather than sitting there and stewing about it.
During this exchange, Hawk finally flings his popcorn debris at the wrong person, who causes a dude in the front row to get up.
Who the hell did that?
Hawk quickly puts his hands down. That's where we cut back to the wilderness, where Robby has now finally gotten pretty good at balancing up on that log, so he goes to tell Daniel about his hard work, but Daniel is balancing on a whole nother level.
Daniel is trying to balance on one hand so he can execute what he tells Robby is
the most powerful kick in Miyagi-Do karate.
And indeed, he was upside down. This looks a little bit like when Luke Skywalker is upside down in The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, Jedi strength flows from the Force.
But it's also so like next level cornball in terms of special powers that it reminds me of CGI Yoda's lightsaber duel against Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones. It's just that side of like, really? But again, Ralph Macchio can sell me anything, so I buy it. Hook, line, and sinker.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for doing our due diligence and having our obligatory Star Wars reference for this episode.
Yes.
Second of all, I guess I should probably take this opportunity to mention a bonsai tree.
Bonsai tree.
But third of all, this mystical kick. This isn't the crane kick. This isn't the drum technique. This is now a new third amazing Miyagi-Do technique that's going to get us out of a jam, I'm sure, by the final act of this Cobra Kai series.
It's so funny because if that's the most powerful kick in Miyagi-Do and they're already telling us, I'm not sure where else they can go from here, but I accept it. And I like we've seen Robby going from cool kid, totally unfazed, to being like, Mr. LaRusso? When he sees Daniel upside down on that rock. Kudos to Tanner Buchanan for showing this character evolving in ways that are surprising. And again, it makes me wonder, like, because he's a stand-in for Johnny, if Johnny had done Miyagi-Do, I'm trying to imagine how Johnny Lawrence would sound if he became that bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Maybe we'll find out.
Maybe. I mean, we've got to up the ante somehow, right? So that's a great way.
We see that Daniel and Robby have learned important lessons. At least Robby has. Mm-hmm. And now we cut to a house we remember from a flashback in episode 6, when Johnny as a child is sitting around the dinner table with his mom and stepdad. And again, now Sid in present day is played by Ed Asner. He's sitting there at the head of the table just like he did when Johnny was a kid, barking at his caregiver and getting cream cheese on his face from his bagel. And Johnny walks in, and of course Sid assumes that Johnny's there to ask for money, but that's not what he's there for.
No, this time Han Solo has Jabba's money, and he slides a fresh envelope full of cash across the table. Johnny has plenty of money and plenty of pride in the bank at this point, and he's more than willing to divest himself from Sid and his obligations to his stepfather. And the symbol for that is for him to pay back Sid all the money that he's ever loaned Johnny over the years.
And Sid tries to browbeat him and pull him back into their web of bullying. But Johnny's saying, you need my money. And Johnny said,
I never needed your money. It's just the only thing you had to give.
And that's a great moment when Johnny walks out with a little smile on his face, knowing that he's free of that obligation and that shame that he carried around. 2
major wins in a row for Johnny, 2 episodes back to back. It's pretty good times for Johnny. And back at the LaRusso manse, it looks like pretty good time for the LaRussos, as Lucille and Amanda have patched up their differences. Everybody's started popping bottles. We've got wine all over the place, which I'm sure also helped. And Robby has come back with Daniel, and Daniel's invited Robby to dinner, which is unfortunate because Miguel then pulls up outside on his bike, ready to reintroduce himself to Sam and to the entire LaRusso family. But what's this? He hears some commotion coming from the backyard.
There's everyone sitting happily around the table by the pool. There's Sam talking to this kid, and it looks like she's flirting with him. They get along great. And by the way, this is the first time I've ever seen Robby so happy as a character. Everyone's getting along. We are suddenly back in the Karate Kid at the moment when Daniel LaRusso is trying to find Allie at the Encino Hills Country Club and gets spaghetti all over him. Miguel, even though no one sees him, is humiliated and retreats.
It's a mirror of exactly what happened at that country club.
Jerry Weintraub would be very sad that Fascination was not playing at that moment.
Oh, indeed. And yeah, we go from Miguel's emotional defeat back over to Johnny's apartment, where Johnny is struggling with some emotions of his own. A moment ago, he kind of reconciled things with Sid, and I think, much like he straightened up his apartment and straightened up his relationship with Sid, he wants to straighten up his relationship with Robby as well. So he's trying his best to write Robby a letter.
Johnny he only has 2 pictures in his house. One is that framed picture of his mom from the 80s, and the other one is Robby's childhood soccer photo that we saw in the early episodes of the show that he had on his fridge. And that's all he has of Robby, and he has it there sitting on his table. And he's writing this letter, and he says, in voiceover, he explains that he's writing this letter because Robby refuses to answer his calls, and he refuses to text or whatever. Like, they won't meet each other halfway in the media that are available to them. So he's writing this letter. He's made mistakes in his life, but his biggest mistake is what he allowed his relationship with Robby to become. Mm-hmm. So we've seen Johnny sort of level up, right? Like level 1, he cleaned his house. He's not letting the mistakes of the past determine his future. Level 2, he was already self-sufficient and didn't need Sid, but he went and put a button on that and was like, nope, we're done. But now level 3 is like the real boss fight for Johnny is, this is my real vulnerability. I love my son and I have no relationship with him. So he's trying to reach out. And he would have finished that letter, but for a noise outside.
Johnny, alone in his apartment, hears a noise outside and quickly goes out to investigate because it's quite a commotion, because it looks like Louie and some of the biker thugs previously established are really taking it to Johnny's beloved Firebird.
Now we see that Louie, who just seemed like a dog's body, like a convenient Shakespearean element of comic relief, actually has been setting up a plot point this whole time, as he and his biker buddies that he met in Vegas are there to teach Johnny Lawrence and Cobra Kai a lesson by beating the crap out of that Firebird that Louie's been fixated on ever since Daniel fixed it for free. Louie just thought they were going to be like beating the shit out of the Firebird, but no, the biker dude has gasoline. When Louie's trying to stop him, when Johnny comes out and rightly begins kicking the tar out of the biker, it's not just one guy, it's like multiple dudes. And Louie looks on like, oh, I have bitten off more than I can chew here.
Louie is desperately trying to teach Johnny a lesson, but oh ho ho, as we know from many episodes of Cobra Kai, Johnny refuses to be taught lessons. And so he is able to quickly dispatch the bikers with some excellent display of Cobra Kai karate. Johnny then, very Batman-like, tries to get Daniel's address out of Louie.
Where are they?
In Cedar Hills, Escalon Drive.
He tells him the street. He doesn't tell him the house number. So Johnny's got a little bit of a challenge ahead of him, but I'm sure given the sheer amount of rage he's feeling at this moment, having seen his newly repaired Firebird go up in flames, Johnny will search all night and lie in wait as soon as he finds Daniel LaRusso's Tony Mansion.
He doesn't get the exact address, but it's close enough for a TV show. And one of the bikers that he left on the ground decides to take it out on Johnny by flinging a lighter into his gasoline-laden car.
Hey, asshole! Burn in hell.
Setting it ablaze. Johnny grabs one of the biker's bikes, and this also puts Johnny back on a bike out for revenge, just like he was back in the original Karate Kid, and roars off, presumably to find Daniel and settle things once and for all.
Indeed. That's it for episode 8, aka Molting. I have to say that this is the moment at which I was most grateful that YouTube gave us all the episodes at once. Because that my heart almost burst out of my chest when it became clear that Johnny was about to go hunting for Daniel.
It's the moment that the show has been promising us for the entire season so far, and of course they're going to save it for pretty much the climax of the series. And
so why is this episode called Molting?
That is a great question. I think it's because this is a moment where a lot of the characters, Robby, Johnny, maybe even Miguel a little bit, like they kind of shed their skin and they shed their loser skin. They become more comfortable in their newfound identities, I guess. Miguel, his newfound identity is badass. Certainly the other Cobra Kai kids are very happy where they are right now, provided they aren't being chased by wild dogs, I suppose. And Robby's definitely happier in his new position, even though he is going to have to come to an uncomfortable truth with Daniel eventually.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is that the person who molts the most in this is Robby. I think we see him, go from one kind of kid to another. Tanner Buchanan pulls that off extremely well. We see also that Johnny is molting, right? And I was thinking about this while watching this episode, that this show has multiple protagonists and multiple POV characters, but really, it's Johnny and Robby's journey together, that it's their soul that we're most worried about. Like, once Daniel got his groove back, I wasn't worried about his soul. I was worried about his temper or his health, or that, maybe Johnny's going to go kick his ass now. But, in terms of souls, I, at this point in the show, am not worried about Miguel's soul. I'm worried about Johnny and Robby's souls. That may change. And so it's really interesting to see both those guys, because of fateful dinners with families they've chosen or are in the process of choosing, will find maybe more self-acceptance or new hope for their life. That's how it looks at the end of this episode, or that's how it looked at least until Louie rolled in with his biker pals.
Louie, damn you.
He is the worst, but I mean, honestly, it's so well done, because in the beginning you're like, oh yeah, it's a reference to Uncle Louie. That's funny and kind of harmless. And now it's like, oh no, man, Uncle Louie's son is the spawn of Satan.
Louie is purpose-built to ruin everyone's day. Like, from bean to cup, he fucks up.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that thick of it reference.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's so great to see Ed Asner. It's so nice to see that reprise of his dynamic with Johnny, and Johnny to find closure with that. There are so many lovely moments in this episode with Randy Heller coming back as Lucille and all this heightening going on around the characters and how everyone has the best of intentions is obvious. Like Miguel wants to support Johnny. That's one reason why he gets so upset about Johnny's loss to Daniel is like he's loyal. Like these are things to be praised, but you can also see that something can quickly go awry because of these loyalties that are not qualified by the fuller story. Yeah, like the training sequences are so great, from Johnny's tough love.
I love the training sequences.
To Daniel's finding your balance. There couldn't be a stronger juxtaposition, except that like Johnny's Cobra Kai training seems so much less terrifying than John Kreese's Cobra Kai training.
I mean, it brings up a great question: is any of this stuff that Johnny could have possibly gotten from Kreese, and hopefully season 2 will answer more of those questions, because it's like Johnny's doing some, like, he threw Miguel into a pool hands tied. He literally let the dogs loose on the Cobra Kai kids in this episode, and presumably it's all in the name of teaching them to toughen up. But, like, was any of this required for Johnny? It's an interesting question, and I hope it's a question we get an answer to.
Incidentally, while we're here, I think it's been a while since we've been on an Easter egg hunt, and in addition to the ones we already mentioned, I had a couple. Number one...
ooh, okay.
Yeah, number one, I think I might have said this in the first episode of Cobra Kai, but in case I didn't, pretty sure Iron Eagle is there for Stan Zabka, Billy Zabka's dad, because he was an AD on that movie. Secondly, when they're going towards the big fallen tree, the log on which Robby will find his balance, Robby notes that he felt like Jackie Chan, which is also a reference to the non-Miyagi-verse Karate Kid movie.
Oh, yes.
With Jackie and Jaden Smith.
Ah, very interesting indeed.
Yeah.
So I suppose within the realm of the Miyagi-verse, it is possible that there is a Karate Kid movie starring Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith, and nobody has any knowledge that there was an 80s version.
Oh my God, that's like the pocket dimension in Johnny Lawrence's suitcase.
Yeah. Exactly. Like you said, great training sequences. A lot of it was done to kind of mirror the same sequences from Karate Kid 1, which were all very gorgeously shot and well choreographed. And these were done equally as... There was just as much care given to these, I feel. It's a different environment, obviously, but it's still done in the same spirit, and you can definitely tell.
There's a little ironic moment during the dinner with Miguel's family. I think that the grandma's prayer, I didn't catch all of it because it was in Spanish, but I think she appeals to a merciful God. Like to God of mercy, which would not jive with Johnny perhaps, but yet the affect of it reached him, even if the words might have alienated him if he spoke any languages aside from English, which I guarantee he does not.
And yet this is the episode where Johnny Lawrence learns a little something about intersectionality, and I think that's great.
Wait, how do you mean that he's learning about intersectionality?
Like, there was no, like, high status or low status in that interaction in the same way that maybe Sam and Miguel have like a high status, low status trade-off, during their scenes in the previous episodes.
I think I would say maybe more than intersectionality, like Johnny actually has an interaction with people who have a visibly and drastically different story than he does.
Yeah, an experience outside his own. I guess that's what I meant by that.
But it's interesting because in that scene, Carmen or someone asks where he grew up or what his story is, and he's like, I grew up in Encino, and she's like,
Really? Really nice houses there.
And he's like,
well, it's because you live in a nice house doesn't mean nice things are going on inside.
That's really interesting to see him have that moment of emotional honesty with people who are so different and to find commonality there. I think that does a whole lot for Johnny. If you place it in the context of just what a casual racist he was in the beginning of the season. Like, this is a new world to him.
All right. Well, I think that's all that we can say about Molting, but I think that was a really great episode, and I can't wait to come back next week for episode 9, Different But Same.
I'm very curious. I wonder what's going through Johnny's mind, and I can't wait to talk about what happens when Johnny finds Daniel.
All right. Well, until then, I've been Colin Canaday.
I've been Jenny Carlson, and we will see you around the Miyagi-verse.
See you around the Miyagi-verse.
This podcast has been produced and hosted by Colin Canada and Jenny Carlson.
Our music is by Chepo. You can find us online at areyouKarateKiddingMe.com
and wherever you download podcasts.